welcome to The Art of Adventure. This is episode 299 with Beth Weinstein. The Art of Adventure is the podcast where we look at adventure, entrepreneurship, peak performance, metaphysics, and human potential. I'm your host, lead explorer and guide, Derek Loudermilk. You can go to derekloudermilk.com to check out the show notes for this episode. And wow, we're almost at 300 episodes. And this is a great time for us to just think about direction for the show going forwards. I said when I first started this 5 or 6 years ago, I'm going to do 300 episodes. That's what I'm committing to. And now that I'm at almost 300, I definitely want to keep going. But I'd love to hear from you if there's anything that you'd like to see more of, or less of for that matter. So you can hit me up on Instagram, you can email me, you can message me from my website. And this is your chance to have some input in the direction of the show. If there's some really cool new ideas that need exploring and this is the right forum to do it, then I would love to hear from you. So thank you. All right, so on to today's guest. Beth Weinstein is a good friend of mine. She's another business coach, and she's really been stepping into this space of helping entrepreneurs who are in the world of plant medicines and psychedelics. Last year, she hosted the Psychedelics and Purpose Summit with just a ton of the world's experts on psychedelic and plant medicine. And this huge exploding potential is this sort of rebirth of psychedelics. And we talk about how she was able to start talking more publicly about both her trips to the Amazon and the diet, the medicine path, but also how she helps people utilize that for business, and also how she was able to start speaking her truth a bit more about this stuff rather than keeping it hidden in the dark. Another part of this episode is she takes us through her personal journey, how she first became an entrepreneur. She was in the design world, clothing design. Her first business was not anything to do with coaching at all. It was running design company. She was a runner, so she and I share that in common as well. And Beth she's just a great storyteller. I think you're really going to love hearing her perspective and how her life and career has progressed and evolved as she's opened up to things just happening for her. So without further ado, here's my friend Beth Weinstein. Beth Weinstein, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Derek. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad you could come on the show. So as we were chatting before, there's always something interesting that you're up to. You've done a lot of trips, traveling different places this year. You're a business coach for spiritual entrepreneurs. Actually, I'd love to start with how you talk about what you do, how you explain it to people. Like if you meet someone at a party.
This is what I say. So I'm a business coach helping current and aspiring entrepreneurs align with their purpose and grow their business in a step-by-step process. So you know what to do first, you know what to do next, and you're not winging it on your own. So that's kind of the fast pitch. Essentially, I call myself a spiritual business coach. So I help people who tend to be on a spiritual path, on this path of awakening, to really step into their purpose. Most of my clients are making the transition out of working for others or having a 9-to-5 type job, and they're feeling the call to do something that's more aligned with who they truly are, and it tends to be more purpose driven. A lot of people on the path of coaching, healing, spiritual counseling, psychedelic integration, which we'll talk more about, people who are starting to realize that what's been working for them in the past is no longer working, and they feel called to do something else, but they don't know where to start. They feel stuck. They don't know how to even go about doing it. So I help them get it up started, get their first clients, and start making money with their true purpose, with what they're here to do, so they can actually have more freedom, more fulfillment, and actually love doing what they do for a living. Essentially, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So you and I are pretty similar. I think we work with similar types of people. But one thing I'm curious is when we first met last year, you were starting to think about how you eventually ran a summit about this, but how to incorporate medicine work, plant medicine, psychedelics, whatever you want to call it, into business. And there's a couple of questions. So let's first start with, how did you know that it was time to start talking publicly about that aspect of you and your business? Yeah.
Me. Yeah. I love that you're asking this. So Derek was actually with me when I was going into this really deep journey of like feeling the call, right? So I had been running similar summits, these interview series for many years, and they've been fun, great. They were all about spiritual business, very aligned with what I teach and who I am. But I'm also very much on the path of sacred plant medicine and psychedelic consciousness expansion. And many years ago, I think it was after doing my first summit, I was like, wow, I started getting this, what I call a download, an idea from beyond about psychedelics, because no one's talking enough about this except, of course, the media and then the podcasters, like the handful of big podcasters out there talking about the Tim Ferrisses and the Joe Rogans. And I was like, well, what about just the regular person who's out doing this, who is starting to get messages around being misaligned with their business or their job, or misaligned with their career or whatever it is. And so this came to me many years ago, and I kept thinking about it. And I also started getting more and more clients who were on the medicine path, even when I wasn't doing any marketing around it. Like it kind of just happened, it's probably energetics, or probably that one time where I mentioned I went to the jungle, somehow clients came to me. Like it kind of blew my mind when I got a client from Australia who was on the medicine path. And I was like, well, how do you know about me? Like it's different if they're interconnected to my network, but someone random in Australia, it started making me think like, wow, I really love helping people on this path, because we can talk very openly about something that they can't talk openly with just anybody about. It's nice to be able to integrate the experiences into what you do for a living, whether it's, changing careers, starting a business, your current career. And I really enjoyed it. And I also saw a lot of really good results coming with these clients. So I kept feeling pulled and called and told and shown it, and like literally like, this is what it looks like. But then there was all the fear, the fear around like, this is illegal at, in most parts of the world. This is taboo as a society still, even if it's kind of on its way up. There was a lot of like, will this isolate me from other types of clients? Do I want them knowing? Because I actually had some clients who had no idea I was on this path. But then more and more, I also started feeling like this is actually really needed. Because I knew when I first been working with psychedelics since I was a teenager, and now I'm a lot older, but I do know how it can be very isolating to not have someone to talk to about this, or not have a community. I've been lucky where I've had a community for many years, but when I first started, I didn't really have many people to talk to. Or it's like, oh, I can talk to people at Burning Man, but once I leave Burning Man, I have to put on my mask and not talk about it ever again, right? So I knew that there was a need for this. It was just a matter of getting over my own fears of being judged. I actually, at one point, I was like, oh, I'm going to have the authorities at my front door, like arresting me for talking about this. Like there's that kind of fear. Like I even talked to someone about getting an attorney, and, like maybe I should be protected, or what if I've actually experienced censorship on social media already? So that was a fear too, is like, well, great, now I have to watch for censorship, which, by the way, all of us really have to watch out for censorship, because it's everybody now.
Did social media cancel your account or something?
No, they didn't, thank God. Please don't cancel me, you guys, because I actually know a few people who are banned right now. No, but there were some posts that were not getting any engagement at all, like zero. And I was like, well, why is it that I have thousands of people and it's getting zero engagement? Like clearly something's wrong. And I found out I used a hashtag that's banned. So I didn't even know there was such a thing as banned hashtags. But yes, there are many banned hashtags on Instagram. Someone who's a good friend of mine who I interviewed for my conference, his name is East Forest, he's a musician. When we were talking, it just so happened during my conference, he got censored on 35 different media outlets for a song. He's a musician. He released a song that happened to be about psilocybin and had Ram Dass talk about it. His voice was in the song, and the video was banned on 35 media outlets. I'm like, this guy is like a legit musician. He's not like a guy who's just tripping on mushrooms writing music. Like he's played at Wanderlust Festival. He's played TED Talks, Summit at Sea. He's Google. And I'm like, damn, man, we're in like the real world of like the media doesn't want us talking about psilocybin. The friend of mine I know who's banned on Facebook right now is talking about sex. Sex, which is how humans are created. Like, since when is that taboo? Of course it is because the media, but she's not even posting nude photos or anything. She's literally just talking about sex and energy, and, it's like tantra really. And she's banned because that's, the world we're in right now.
Hearing that, I think a lot of times, at least where I operate from, is like, here's a cool idea, let me just go and talk about it. And then I hear from other people like, oh, are you really thinking of doing that? Like, aren't you worried about XYZ? Or like, aren't you worried about being banned? And then it brings in all these like things that fear-based things that I would have never considered. And I think, probably a lot of people they take on these stories that like, oh my gosh, this is way more dangerous to do something. That's something I experienced with my clients. Like, what will people think? What if I change this career path, etc.? Is that something that comes up a lot with people that you work with as well?
Of course. What's funny is, so I actually do help some people who are on the path to psychedelic integration coaching or integrating psychedelic work into their business as a coach or a healer. But even the people that are not doing anything taboo, everybody struggles with this fear of judgment or a fear of being seen or a fear of having an opposing viewpoint. Like one of my clients last year in my group mastermind program, but she's in traditional healthcare. She came from doctor or hospital and was going into functional medicine. She was making that shift into functional medicine coaching and opening her own clinic. And even within that realm that she came from, she was the taboo woman who's talking about woo-woo stuff that doctors didn't want to hear about. Like, oh, that's a crock of shit. And even she came up against like, what will people think? I'm going to be the outcast. People are going to shun me. I'm going to lose my job. And I'm like, well, first of all, we don't know unless you try. And of course, what ended up happening, which is exactly what happened with me and my business, is once she started opening up and really standing her ground and sharing her wisdom and sharing all the knowledge she had that the other doctors didn't have, they actually started opening up their minds more and were like, well, maybe you should head up this initiative in the hospital. You know what I mean? Like, and this is how we facilitate change on the planet. And I actually, when I interviewed Rick Doblin for my conference, he sees this renaissance as part of, like, as equivalent to the gay rights movement, the LGBT rights, standing up for, imagine, the 70s, what happened. And it's like, look at all the progress we've made since then. And yes, it hasn't been easy, but he said this is actually more, and this is the most important time for people on these paths, whether it's psychedelics or alternative healing or the esoteric or whatever. This is the time to actually speak up more. This is the time of truth. Like 2020, clear vision is the year. And this is how we create change, because he said we have rights. People choose to work with psilocybin, even though the government deems it as illegal in most places, but it's still our human choice. And we have a right as a human to decide that this works for me, even if it doesn't work for you, even if it doesn't work for our government. And he said, this is how we're actually going to facilitate change, because there's proof that psychedelic assisted therapy is changing lives. It's curing PTSD faster than traditional methods. It's helping a lot of people on their path of spirituality, anxiety, depression, awakening, finding purpose. Like, I could go on and on. So, yeah.
So actually, let's dig into that, because we're talking about aligning, so people on the medicine path is a new term for me. But if we're talking about how that helps with business, I imagine that it goes beyond just like, oh, I had a great idea because of this, or I got a download or something. So how do you see integrating or using plant medicine to actually help with business?
Yeah, so it's funny. I don't actually tell anybody to go do it, right? To me, it's people who are either already on the path or curious, or maybe they've had enough really powerful experiences to wake something up in them that's like, wow, my career is misaligned, or something's not working and it's time to make change. So I don't facilitate. I don't give away any substances. I never actually encourage anyone to go do it, because I don't believe it's for everybody. But what usually happens is, and this is what I've experienced in my mastermind last year. So there was a handful of people, a couple of them I had known for a few years before that, and I had witnessed them as they dove deeper into experimenting with psychedelics and medicine, and also, meditation, therapy, body-based therapy, just the regular path of all consciousness expansion and inner growth and healing. They started to realize, I don't like my job. It's really hate going there. It's making me miserable. It's causing me anxiety. I'm totally misaligned with what I'm doing at work. And what I'm really called to do is this. Most of them are coaches. Like, I really want to help people. I really believe in this path. And so what would happen is, they already started to feel it, right? It's coming from their higher self, let's say. That's my belief. And regardless of the psychedelics, they're already feeling something's wrong because they're unhappy. And what happens is in the work with all the psychedelics, it pretty much amplifies and gives you a lot of clarity around what's working and not working in your life. And of course, a lot of times it's what's not working. And a lot of times it will show you possibilities, right? It'll show you something that, a vision that is something that you would like. Wow, I saw a possibility of how I could actually help people for a living and quit my job. Or wow, I saw how one person's I just saw how I can incorporate my sound, my music into my energy work and into coaching. And this would actually have more an effect on people than me sitting in an office doing crunching numbers for a living, which is what she was doing. So what happens is in this process of awareness around what's not working and what's feeling the call, what would be exciting, what would light you up, what would give you more freedom, for more free time, and also your soul wants to contribute. Your soul wants to do more than something that's making you feel like a prisoner at work all day. And so what happens is they come to me at this place where they've had all the visionary experiences with the psychedelics, and then there's also a day-to-day awareness of what's not working. And when you bring them together, and then you get a coach that actually understands all of it, that's the path to actually making it real. I don't believe psychedelics are here just to have fun and see things. It's actually here to awaken something inside us very exponentially faster than I meditate. I believe in meditation, but it works very fast, way faster than meditation. So what it is it's waking something up inside you, and you're starting to realize wow, I need to make change. And that's what a coach does. Me and Derek, this is what we help you do, is actually bring it to reality, make your visions from your dreams real. Take that part of you that's been dreaming and dreaming and dreaming for 4, 7, 10 years about starting a business and actually get going on it. Because what are you waiting for? We only live once and life happens now.
There you go. It's funny you mentioned that. There's nothing like thinking about your own mortality to get your butt in gear. So what you're saying is that sometimes a plant medicine ceremony or psychedelic experience will bring the ideas. It'll help make new connections. It'll be like, oh, I could combine this with this. So at some point, they're starting to think about what a new possible reality could look like. And then they're also starting to look at the ways that their current reality is not working. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. That's what I've witnessed from clients and myself. But, I don't speak for everybody. So
yeah. And so before you were doing any coaching, you had a running apparel business, if I'm correct. Was that a response to, because that was a step before where you are now, was that a response to something that wasn't working for you? And then tell me a little bit about your own progression.
Yeah. So when I was, and it's funny, someone on Facebook posted the other day, stop saying you were always born an entrepreneur. I'm like, no, I actually really was. So when I was a little kid, I was that kid that's I knew I wanted to work for myself. I actually saw myself as being the number 2 of a company. So not being the founder, but being the person that helps the founder do everything. So I always knew that this is the path I was on, and I never knew what it was. I never knew what kind of business I wanted. But I took that traditional journey into corporate America, get a steady job. But I actually liked what I did, but I always felt totally misaligned. And so I was working in the apparel industry, doing product development and production, a very operational role, managing lots of people, being kind of that number 2. Basically, I ran almost every area of companies because without us, you wouldn't even have a product. I was living in New York City at the time, and as a 20-something in New York, pretty much all you do for fun is go out drinking. That's the New York City pastime. And, I was always athletic and very active. I'm a fire sign and have a lot of energy. And yes, I was always on the psychedelic path. My first acid trip was when I was 14. So I was always kind of in this consciousness realm. I was always on a spiritual path. I studied psychology and art history in college. But I took up running because I played sports my whole life. And, I wasn't playing sports in my 20s because it's not high school anymore. But running was the closest thing I found to going to a party. So I used to go to raves. I started as a big raver in the 90s, when I was young. I was a teenager sneaking out and going to raves. And I loved dancing. I love the music. I love the community. And of course, I did the drugs. I actually didn't do a ton, but I did a fair amount. But what happened was when I took up running, I fell in love with it because first of all, it didn't involve getting drunk every night. It was a community, there was a big running community in New York. And every time I ran a race, it was like being at a party. I was like, this is just like going to a rave, except it's healthy. So I got really into running. It kept me super sane. It got rid of depression, anxiety, and all the other stuff you're dealing with as a 20-year-old in New York City. And I also had...
Can I jump in here really quick?
Yeah.
Why did you feel misaligned? Could you articulate that? Yeah.
Oh, in my career? Well, it's weird. I actually liked the process of what I did for a living. I hated the industry. I hated working for other people. I never fit into corporate because I'm a very outspoken, honest person. And I didn't play that corporate game very well of like, suck it up and you'll be promoted. I usually, every time I got promoted, I had to I went in and was like, yo, it's time to promote me. And if you don't, I'm out of here. And that's how I would get promotions, which of course in corporate, they're like, it works sometimes. And other times they're like, who the fuck are you? And it's, my personality I knew it. I knew it from the beginning, but I also was taught to believe that you go get a corporate job and everything's great and you'll stay there for 30 years. But clearly when I've been through a few recessions now and clearly that isn't true. It doesn't work. I was in 9/11, New York City 9/11. I got to experience that. And I just knew that my goal was always to have a business. I just didn't know what it was. But when I was entrenched in this running and I took it up, I got really into it, started running marathons, eventually did ultras. But in the process at the time, this is over 12, 13 years ago, something like that. God, maybe even longer. One thing that was bothering me as a woman in New York City who needed to wear, first of all, I wanted to look cool, but it needed to be functional. The clothes at the time are not designed for a cool, Brooklynite, running in New York City. And I was like, why are all the clothes kind of designed for men and the women's clothes are afterthoughts? And additionally, living in the city, I needed to carry my whole entire life in my running pocket, this big. So I needed credit card, keys, blah, 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 phone. Back then phones were a little smaller. And I kept thinking to myself, God, I can make better running clothes than Nike. I actually used to say that. I'm like, these shorts suck. They don't even fit properly. They don't have a pocket that holds a Metro card. They don't even hold a driver's license. Who the hell is designing this stuff? Nike actually called me once to interview with them, by the way. And I was like, I'm only going there if I could redesign everything. So I kept starting to think about why can't I find any running clothes that I love? Me and all my friends, we were kind of just settling for what's available. And so I started thinking about this and it would not leave me alone. It just kind of started as thoughts, I knew because I knew how to develop and produce clothes from the inside out. I was like, it would not cost them more than 5 cents to increase this, the size of this pocket or put on a zipper for another 50 cents, whatever. So it started as kind of just thoughts. And over the years, I became really good friends with a highly successful entrepreneur who's one of my best friends now. He started dropping ideas in my head hey, Beth, why don't you start a clothing line? And I was like, actually, so it was one thing after another. He introduced me to someone. My first business before then was actually a medical scrubs business, which no one knows about, because he had introduced me to someone who wanted to start this. And I was the one who had all the knowledge and we started on it. It didn't really go anywhere. It only lasted a year and a half. But at that point forward, I knew I was I can do this. And so then of course things started happening. And I always say, if you don't do it, the universe will do it for you. So my dad suddenly died. I got laid off from a job. The recession, it's one thing after another. There were multiple things over time. Spiritual awakening. I took many months off and went traveling around, pretty much around the world. And I was like, man, I can't keep living life like this. I hate what I do. I don't even believe in what I do. And I've always wanted to start this business. So I kind of started thinking about well, what would happen if I actually did it? And I actually had made a transition when I came back from that trip, that travel. I made a transition from the apparel industry into early stage tech startups that were actually crossing into consumer products. So I was kind of doing the same thing, but with better companies that were very, they loved my personality. They were like, oh yes, do whatever you want, say whatever you want, drink beer at 3 p.m, we don't care. And I was like, wow, this is such a better environment. And I actually excelled. But as we know, early stage startups, they can come and go. I worked for 3 of them that ran out of money. Someone else didn't get funding, and it's like one thing after another. And then my entrepreneur friend actually asked me to help open up one of his current businesses. So he basically handed me over, like, you're the CEO, run with it. And I worked on his business and it was fun. But during that process, I was like, well, wait a second. Why am I working for someone else's dream when I am not connected to his vision? Like, I liked it, but it wasn't my passion. That and an interview with Lululemon is what finally got me to do it. I was like, okay, Lululemon is now about to steal my idea. They were coming up with a whole entire new clothing line based on like cool clothes for urbanites like me. And I was like, well, that's my idea. Between that and running this other company, I was like, you know what? If I'm going to work this hard, I might as well work this hard for myself. So that's when I just went and was like, it was a now or never situation. I wasn't really applying. Like, I didn't want to go back to my old industry, and I wasn't really getting the right jobs. I was consulting, and I was like, you know what? Like, if I don't do this, because by then it was 8 years. So it was 8 years of thinking about this running clothing line. It was like eating away at my soul. So I was like, you know what? Let me just do this. I started it as a project, which a lot of my clients will come to me and I tell them to think of it as a project, like think of it as nonprofit for now. So I was very unattached to how it looked and what happened. So I did it for fun. I was like, hey guys, I'm starting a clothing line, blah, blah, blah. I just like went and did it. I designed and manufactured the clothing, did all the sourcing, like nothing was purchased off of, like these are not like t-shirts with printing on it. These are like designed, manufactured. I was in charge, like, the stitching was perfectly made for a particular reason, like every little detail made for an endurance runner. So it was actually a very functioning garment, but it also looked cool. And it was made in New York City. So it was made from sustainable materials. So it was a sustainable business. It supported local manufacturing. I had this big vision, and it kind of started, it just like went and took off. And it was really funny. It was literally the same week that one of these early stage startups ran out of money, and they're like, Beth, we can't keep you anymore. It was the same week that I got some of my very first press in some New York City magazines. And then it was also right before the New York City Marathon, like 3 months before. So it was like divine timing. And I was like, okay, I'm going to give this like a year, suck it up, like see how it goes. It's going to be hard, but let me just see. Like if I don't give it my all for 1 year, or at least like 1 or 2 years, I'm never going to know. And then I just did it. And yeah, it was a struggle, but it got somewhere. It didn't make multi-millions, but it grew. I learned a lot. In the process, this is how I accidentally fell into coaching. So I was already helping all these early stage companies scale, like get their shit together and scale. I was already running my own business, and I constantly, it was getting excessive. Like it was like weekly. Yeah, like pretty much weekly. I would have someone like LinkedIn, friend of a friend, old friend, high school friend, like people would come to me and constantly say, hey Beth, can you talk to me about how you started your business? Can you share with me how you did this? I would have startups, like tech startups, calling me and be like, hey, can we pick your brain? I'm like, And I allowed everybody to just talk to me for years and years and years. And finally I was like, okay, this is getting overwhelming. These tech startups have to start paying me for my time. Like, they're like keeping me on the phone for 2 hours. And I'm like, you should be paying me hourly for this. And finally, there was this one point in my business where it was growing. I was really busy, and I knew I was at this point of like, okay, I need to do something or it's not going to keep growing. And I was committed. And I remember someone called me up for help on her business. And what's ironic is she finally just started it like 5 years later. I knew, I was like, this is weird. She's my friend's wife. He was actually a two-time entrepreneur himself. They lived in this like $2 million house down the street from me in Brooklyn. And I was like, wait, your husband's founded companies. You guys have tons of money and you're asking me for help? Like, that's crazy. She should hire someone to help her. Why would she pick my brain if she could just hire? And then I didn't even know there was such a thing as a business coach. I knew about consultants. I knew about career coaches. And I had friends constantly tell me, like, you should be a career coach. You should go help people with this. You should just do this for a living. And I was like, well, I don't even know what that means. Like, how? I was like, oh, people do this for a living? Like, what do you mean? And so after that woman asked me for help, I actually said no. She was the first person I said no to. I was like, no, I can't talk to you for like 6 more months. And she was like, whatever. And so I said to myself, the next person who asks me for help, I'm going to request money and make them work with me for like a period of time, like for at least a few months, because I noticed that I kept helping people and no one was getting results. I would have like a one coffee date and then like see them a year later and they'd be like, no, I never did anything. I'm like, well, why not? I just gave you all the steps. And there was something that was a disconnect. And I was like, what's the disconnect here? Like people, but I'm a very different person. I'm very driven. I'm usually good at like, if I want to do something, I go do it. So I don't, sometimes it takes me 8 years, but I don't, if I have a coffee date with someone and they tell me how to start a business, I'll go start it, you know? Like if I asked Derek, I want to start a podcast, give me an hour of your time, and Derek told me every step, I'd be like, okay, let me do it. Because why waste Derek's time? And so I started getting almost like angry. I was like, you know, you got to pay me, you got to work with me. And so the next person who asked me like a month later, it was someone I didn't know. It was like friend's little brother. And I said it. I was like, okay, yeah, I'm willing to talk to him, but tell him that he has to pay and he has to work with me for at least a few months. And he said yes. And that was my first client. And I was like, okay, I'm onto something. This is really fun. I could do this. And then, you know, and then from there it just took off.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. When people are asking you constantly to pick your brain, when they want to learn something from you, that's usually a good sign. There's a marketplace for what you know, that what you should be helping people, or you could help people, you know, so that the pick your brain thing. Yeah. And a lot of times if people don't have skin in the game, right? If they just like, okay, here's some interesting stuff that Beth told me, but there's no consequence for me to like keep waiting, then they won't. So yeah, the money thing is like I've experienced it myself. As soon as I put my money where my mouth is, I'm like, okay, let's get down to business. Like, and all that day, I'm like working harder than I ever have, you know? I want to ask you about, you were working for startups, you were helping this other guy with his company, and you were starting your running business. Was that all sort of at the same time and you just had a lot of things going on?
Yeah, I mean, I overlapped, and this is, you know, most of my clients come to me and I'm like, I encourage the overlap unless you have a huge chunk of money saved up. But yeah, I was, you know, I started my first business while in corporate, and that gave me the entrepreneur bug. And then I lost that job, thank God. And then when I started the running apparel business, yeah, I was actually consulting for, at the time, I remember 2 different early stage startups, and one of them, and this is where I was like, I'm a good entrepreneur. They would give me so many menial tasks that I actually, you would never meet them anyways. I actually outsourced what they paid me for to someone else, because I was like, I would rather spend my time starting at my business and pay someone to do this work, because I knew I was too valuable. They were paying me almost like $1,000 an hour. Essentially, I leveraged my time very well. So I knew, okay, I can start this business while still making money, while still helping other people. You know, I didn't flat out quit anything until it kind of just, they both disappeared at the same time. And then I was like, well, you know what, let me go all in. And I always advise people to not be stuck in crazy scarcity, or else it's going to like ruin your whole business. So
if you can leverage, like if you're being paid even $100 an hour and you have to hire somebody for 50, you're still arbitraging.
Yeah.
I mean, like, yeah, make that trade every time for sure.
Totally. I always thought that was really funny. I'm like, God, if they know that I'm paying someone else to do the actual work, but like, you know, it's kind of like having an agency. It's the same thing.
We've had guys on the show where they don't actually do any of it. They just make the sales.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like the connector. Yeah, I've done that too. Like, oh, just give me my cut.
So, and then you're not doing the running anymore. So did that slowly fade out?
Yeah, actually, I think it just faded out literally like last week, because I was, you know what, why am I paying for the website? I'm never going to run it again. I actually tried giving it to people. You know, I was like, here, you run with it. You know, I told them the reality is, I'm like, it's not easy. It's even the marketing alone. And this is where I kind of started getting burnt out, where it was like, even if I hired other people, but living and breathing the same one subject over and over and over for like many years, like content, running. Like I love running. I still run, but it was like, I need a break. And I was also on such a deep growth path with my spiritual work, with medicine work, that I was like really being called to something else. I shut it down officially last year, and then I kind of just let the website live, because I was actually getting pretty fair amount of traffic. You know, I thought maybe I can monetize it as a blog, but then I realized I didn't even want to manage it as a blog. Like I didn't want to blog. I didn't want to even pay someone a blog. And there were some pretty damn good articles out there, but I'm like, now, unfortunately, the internet's going to be without it. So I kind of was deciding what to do the last like year and a half, and I kind of just let it go. I ran out of inventory. I actually have this like waiting list of people waiting for the shorts. And here's the best part. My own brother took up running just the last couple years. And by the time he like really got into it, I had no inventory left. And what's funny is I found a pair of my own shorts for sale on Poshmark recently, and I bought them for him. So my brother has a pair of the shorts, which I had to buy, supposedly not worn, but I'm like, I cannot believe I'm paying for my own shorts, buying them from someone else on a website to just give my own brother. The best part is he tried to give me feedback, and I'm like, I don't know, don't you realize like I closed this down? So he's like, I would like it 1 inch longer. I'm like, oh man.
That's hilarious.
So I know.
Just sag him a little bit. I want to hear a little bit about your trip around the world. You mentioned that. And as we were talking before the show, you had some hairy situations. It really doesn't matter. I would love to hear just one of your favorite moments or one of your hairiest moments or just something from your trip that's still impacting you.
Oh man. So yeah, I've been to, I think 36 or 7 countries now. One of my funniest, but not so funny at the time experiences in my travels was having a gun right at my head in Brazil, that far away, 2 inches. I had been with my ex-boyfriend's friends who I had just met. I didn't know them. And one of them happened to speak Portuguese and he lived there in Rio. And I just happened to be passing through at the same time a group of them were. So we all met up and we went out one night. This was, I don't know how many years ago, but we went out one night and of course had been drinking all night long. And we took a taxi home at probably like 5 in the morning or 6 in the morning. And I don't know, he said it was like, he kind of tried to explain what happened. I will never know what actually happened. We were in a taxi, wasted, thank God. And all of a sudden got pulled over and they made us roll down the windows. And there's these like men that I think were like some form of a cop or a rogue cop. I don't know, some kind of police authority type. But they had these like semi-automatic weapons. They weren't just handguns, by the way. They were like huge weapons, like gigantic things that I would only see in like movies. And I'm like, holy crap. And I happened to be on the side of the car where they made them roll down the window and they were just pointing these guns. And I remember looking at the gun being like, I am so glad I'm wasted right now. Like that's all I could think, because if I wasn't, I would have lost my shit and started screaming and freaking out. And then I probably would have caused them to like shoot me, and we just sat there like silent in disbelief, like what the hell is happening? And, the guy I knew was like speaking Portuguese, answering questions. And eventually they let us go. And I was like, okay, what was that all about? And he was just kind of like, like I think to him that was like something he's seen before. Like this is normal. It's Brazil. And this is Brazil many years ago before their economy got better, before it got worse again. So it was when things were not it was way before the World Cup. It was before the World Cup. So that was a crazy one. I've an Argentinian taxi driver.
How did that change your perspective, right? First time you're in the presence of people with big ass guns. Did it do anything? I mean, what was the...
Yeah. I mean, I had been traveling. I used to travel a lot to Asia for business and I traveled alone a lot, like after business trips. This one I think was one of my first like real like intense, because essentially I was alone. I was alone there. And I remember that time in Brazil was one of the first travel experiences where I never felt like safe. But the one thing I think it did for me, and it's funny because I lived in New York City for, 21 years and I was like, I never felt unsafe in New York, but it did 2 things. So one, it actually was nice because it never scared me. It never made me more scared to travel, but it did really give me a deep level perspective of, okay, well, I live in this bubble of, like safety, even though the US is known for having many guns, but really to just realize like the realities of the way the rest of the world lives. Okay, from what I understood, I think we were passing by a favela and it was the favela officers that just wanted to know, like, what are you doing around here? But also just to get a perspective of this is very actually common in many, many countries where it's like they're protecting their own, it's not... And even if it was a police, it's like, do we trust that police? So it really woke up something in me and what's nice is it kind of normalized other scary experiences. Like I've had a bunch of other weird experiences in other countries. So, I never, like, not to say it toughened me up. It just kind of made me realize like, oh, okay, when you go to a third world country or a country that's in kind of not the best economic and political state, these things are normal. And we're just living in this bubble in the US that doesn't really realize the way most of the world actually lives.
You know what's really interesting is that I didn't experience that, what you're talking about, until I came back to St. Louis, and all of a sudden my neighborhood is right on the edge of like this like murder district. And so you hear like gun battles. Our first night back, we heard 2 gun battles, and I was like, oh, this is ridiculous. So we ended up moving since then. But there was a gun discharge like right outside my house. In the alley behind my house, there was like people shooting each other inside of a car, which was kind of crazy. You know, but so until something like this enters your awareness, right, you have this like, you're not placing your attention on the fact that there's problems all over the world, right? Like I don't feel connected to a lot of these problems until they like come right into your personal space. And then you realize, oh, a lot of people are dealing with this in my city. There's tens of thousands of people that is like a normal thing for them, you know, in a favela or in the hood that deal with this.
Yeah, it's like an awakening. And you're right. It's like it's happening all around us. I've been kind of like, I've been lucky to be in New York for 21 years and not have anything crazy happen. I mean, I've witnessed things, but yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. You know, there's a lot of also, you know, like India, for those that have been to India, they know it's like this kind of mixed feeling where it's like, okay, that was a very uncomfortable country to travel alone in as a woman. But there was also some major, it was like a beauty, but it was like, I had a friend who told me, she's like, that is the worst place on earth. I hate it. And I will never go back there. She's like been to so many third world countries. Like our sister was in the Peace Corps, you know what I mean? Like, and she's like, I fucking hated India. But then I was like, well, coming from this, you know, white Western privileged perspective of, yeah, well, what if we actually see it differently? And what if it's all about like, okay, waking, like I always say, if and one day I'm super rich, beyond rich, I want to start a scholarship fund that sends wealthy American teenagers, you know, maybe like the day after they graduate from high school, like especially they're privileged. And I get it. I'm from like white suburban area. You send them to India for like 4 weeks. Send them to India and then see what they do with their lives. Like, it's great to see these other perspectives. So it wakes up something in you that's like, okay, this is the way the rest of the world lives. And it's not just the white problems with my iPhone battery dying or, you know, like, damn, I can't get my gluten-free cookies today because the health food store is out of them.
I've never been to India. I don't know if I'll go to India. You know, some places call you. So they're like, oh, go here. You know, like Hawaii or Iceland. India is not one of those places where
yeah, I want to go to Iceland. I know in India, like, I don't know what, one of those weird things where I'm like, I kind of want to go back with someone next time and see, maybe it'll be different, or maybe when I'm in a different place in my life. It's weird. It's like, I hear this from so many people, you know, it's even, I mean, honestly, even going to Peru, I go to Peru every year, and there's even parts of that where I'm like, oh my God, I hate it here. And then it's like, oh, well, but I love this. You know, it's like the constant noise, dirt, honking, heat, you know, crazy. I mean, it's like any third world country. You know, it's all about how you see it, I think. But
yeah. So when last time we were in Bali and Heidi got pregnant with our second, you know, she started, partly because when you're pregnant, your senses get more sensitive. So the motorcycle noise was just like, turn that up for her, and the smells, the like rotting food thrown on the side of the road and all this stuff. And she was just like, we have to get out of developing countries. Like, I can't. So it's really interesting because people give birth all the time in these countries. Like, luckily we could just be like, let's get out of here. You know, I'd love to hear maybe one more story about, do you always go to the same place in the jungle? Like, can you talk a little bit more about your trips down to Peru?
To Peru. Yeah, sure.
Is that what you said? Did you say Peru or Ecuador?
No, I go to Peru. Yeah. You know, one of these days.
Is that like where most of the tribes are, the tribes that do ayahuasca, or?
You know, I wouldn't say, like, I don't know if it's most, but it has a long standing tradition. You know, they grow it there. It's been there for thousands and thousands of years. Yeah. I mean, there's certain areas like kind of where I go, but even, you know, like Iquitos is like super popular for like ayahuasca tourism. You know, like you can step off the airplane and like find places to go drink ayahuasca. I don't go there.
Are you going there with specific, like, okay, here's what I'm thinking about in my business. I have a specific problem that I want to work through, or personal like thing where I'm stuck, and you're like going there with an intent?
I usually do set an intention each time I go, sometimes a little looser than others. And of course, the way it really works is it gives you what you need. It's like that same saying, like, you don't get what you ask for, you get what you need. And sometimes I do approach it with like, hey, just show me what it is you want me to know. Each year I've been tends to have some kind of a theme, which is nice because it ties in usually with where I am in my life and what's going on. And usually I would assume it's around what I need to kind of address the most. Like, okay, well, this is one area that wasn't working for me. And now if I have more awareness around it and more insights, then I can apply it and things will change in my life. Or it's like waking up something on my path to hold and carry now. But yeah, I mean, not everybody sets an intention. My partner went with me this year and he was just kind of like, whatever, I'm just going to experience this and see what it's all about. And then of course, there's always, I think it happened to him too, like a theme, like this is the same thing that kept coming up, and then here's how it really affected his life. So yeah, that's usually how it works.
Can you talk about how your most recent trip this year affected you?
Yeah. Yes, this year it's interesting. So it was the first time I went with my partner. So I actually did approach it a little different because I was, you know what, we're there to do our own work. Like you sleep separately, you have separate huts, tombos, they call them. You're there on your own path. But at the same time, now I had someone who means the world to me in my field. Like, we still have some time together there. So that was an interesting like monkey wrench. But for me, it took me to this deep level place so the theme was actually a sovereign queen. And I had heard this term used many, many times the last few years about being a sovereign being and coming into your sovereignty. And what does it really mean to like be fully embodied as yourself and trust yourself and be yourself and live your most authentic self. And during this showed me kind of this meaning queen, I'm a woman, I'm owning my divine feminine and my voice. And this is a large part of everything I've been going through with my business, with myself personally, with being in a really deep level relationship. And it really showed me the importance, and I know a lot of women are stepping into this empowerment, being unapologetically ourselves, being fully expressed, being standing up for like what we believe in and what we want. And it's not even just women, it's like everybody, essentially it's being a sovereign being, not to say like don't trust anybody, but really trust yourself, your intuition, your higher self, knowing what's best for you. Because more and more I think people are going to start seeing that that's the most reliable of anything that we have. It's not social media. It's not listening to podcasts. It's like, okay, well, what is it that you need, or what is it that you want, and what's inside you already? So it was really deep into all that journey of like, here I am, world, take it or leave it. So really like it's like a fuller embodiment of myself, and it was really beautiful. And it was actually really amazing to come there with a partner and bring our journeys together, but then separate, but then seeing like what has expanded in our relationship since then has been really interesting. And of course, for both of us, it's like, okay, this happens whether you go, like he went to Joe Dispenza last year, a workshop, instead of going on the dieta. And, whether it's that or a dieta, it doesn't really matter. What it is like, okay, stepping into the, this next level version of yourself and your life, like an up level. It's like I say, it's like an operating system upgrade, right?
Yeah.
Really amazing when you go there, like, and two people have this upgrade, and it's like, whew, things have been like on fire ever since. It's great. But it's, it's not always, like, don't get me wrong. It's hard. There are parts of it that suck. There's parts of it that are like suffering. He was like, what the fuck am I doing here? This is the worst thing ever, too. I can't wait to go back next year, and that's like the very typical, I say it's actually very similar to endurance sports. And this. Long bike ride, race, or whatever. Like for me, it's like running a marathon or ultra. It's the best thing ever. It's the best feeling ever. But yeah, of course, mile 22, you're like, this sucks. I'm never doing this again. Why am I here? I'm going to drop out. This is horrible. I'm losing my toenail. It's the same thing, same journey.
Yeah. And have you noticed any, besides in your relationship, what have you noticed it sort of impacting in the rest of your life?
Yeah, well, for this year, that Sovereign Queen journey has really stepped me into a deeper form of self-expression, being unapologetic, not really caring what anybody thinks. It really helped me when coming out really publicly around psychedelics. Because of course, everybody's always gotten haters. Like I have this community, and every now and then there's some person that decides to tell me like they don't like what I have to say, whatever. But this time I got a bunch of people. It was great. I was like, whoa. And just being like, whatever. I always say like the bigger you get, the more, unapologetic you get, the more haters are going to hate. So really stepping into just like, here's me.
It sounds like you actually feel some pride that you got more haters this time around or something.
Yeah, actually, the first one was super triggering because it was very like, I took it very personally, but it's like, I don't know who they think I am. Like they think I'm some like big expert. And I'm like, no, I'm actually just a normal person. Like, yeah, maybe I'm a little of an expert, but I'm just like Beyonce. Like Beyonce's still a human, even though she's a superhuman, she's still a human. Like we're all human. So yeah, the first one I was like, oh, that hurts. And then I started to see it from a different perspective of like, okay, well, actually, there's something in this that probably guided him along his journey. Like he needed to go through that. He needed to say what he needed to say. I actually needed to hear that to realize like, oh, okay, well, actually, this gives me more of a reason to double down on my truth. And this is the world we're stepping into. It's like if we all don't start sharing our truth, we're going to be censored. We're going to be told what to do and think. We're going to become robots. This is actually the time of stepping into our power. And I know that's what these platforms are all about. This is why people are speaking controversial things, talking about things that might piss people off, because if you don't have a way to speak your truth, who are you? Like you're not even a living being anymore because that's taken away from you. It's like you might as well just not exist. So it really made me believe that, okay, there's going to be a lot more haters the more you speak out about things that need to be said to facilitate change on the planet. But I think that's what this journey is all about. And especially in this age that we're in, this age of information, this age of accessibility of, multiple platforms to create whatever it is, like a revolution or make change or start doing business in a different way. Or, like I always use this simple example of like my mom switching to coconut oil, right? Like how do you get the message out about the food system and the foods that we're eating are not, like they don't have nutrition, they're not clean, and how to start eating organic, like more pure foods. If people didn't start speaking up about this many, many years ago, we would all like, who knows what would happen. This is the time that we're in. This is why we have this delivering information to each other. Like there's more of that embodiment. And that's where I'm like, wow, this is so important to really just like, and this is what I communicate to potential clients. It's like, hey guys, the time is now to have your voice heard, to be unapologetically spiritual. Like I always say, it's, and our old business coach talked about this, stepping out of the spiritual closet. There's no more hiding. There's no reason to hide behind the mask. Oh no, I don't believe in astrology because people think it's weird. I'm like, well, no, actually, there's millions and gazillions of people who believe exactly what you do. So it's time to become a leader. And it really is like, I'm in a leadership program right now. And it's, wow, now I see like, this is what it's all about. Communicating, stepping it up, leading change, facilitating transformation. So that's kind of what I've been embodying. Got back in September.
Amazing. I experienced the same thing when I learn about some new wild technique, spiritual or something, and then I'm like, okay, I'm just going to try this with a client. They just take it and run with it. There's no like, really, what's your evidence? They're just like, okay, I'll go use it right away. And it's like, okay, perfect. It's going to work. So there's not the resistance that I would have expected, before.
Yeah. Exactly. Because I have a lot of clients who go through this where they're like, oh, what will people think? Or no one around me wants this. And I'm like, look, even if it's something that's so like alien clay, like even if it's something that's so weird, right? Most 99% of the people out there, if they're not exposed to it, they're at least curious. So why not share yourself fully? Like I actually just spoke to a client before our call who said, yeah, I've been telling people that I'm a psychedelic integration coach. And they all like are like this, and they're like, what? And so he's like, yeah, it's kind of fun because they're all curious. Like no one has freaked out over it yet,
Yeah. And what's coming up for me is like Hollywood's giving us such fantasy and weirdness all the time that, it's like, we'll go see a movie about anything. So it's not really that big of a stretch to just like actually be doing it.
Exactly. I know.
This is probably a good place. You've always got so many interesting things to talk about. But I don't know, is there anything you want to mention that we haven't mentioned so far?
Not in particular. No, I could just plug my programs.
Okay, yeah. Tell us where to find you. Where can people find you online?
So I can be found at BethAWeinstein.com. It's Weinstein. You could also Google me. I'm probably one of the first that come up. I'm also on Facebook. I'm friends with Derek on Facebook, Instagram. Everything's under Beth Weinstein or BethAWeinstein.com. If you're feeling called, you can download. I have a bunch of free downloads. There are, if you're on Instagram, you can see them there. They're on my website. I have a group coaching program. It's a bunch of spiritual entrepreneurs that are very kind of on the newer side to starting and growing a coaching or healing business or, in this realm. And especially if you're one of those people that is called to help people with their psychedelic journey or integrate their journey. A couple of the clients in this program are on that path. So if that interests you at all, reach out.
Brilliant. Beth, always a pleasure. Hope to have you back again on the show. And
thank you so much, Derek. I love the work you're doing. I really appreciate you having me here.
Amazing. Yeah, thanks for that. Okay, talk soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, another great episode with Beth Weinstein. And Beth is really excited to connect with any of you guys. She's been asking me, she said, okay, when this episode, I can't wait to share it when it comes out. Really excited. And so this is a great opportunity. If you've ever wanted to reach out to a guest, all the guests are very approachable, but Beth especially. So drop her a line on email her, Instagram, Twitter, whichever you prefer, and let her know what was fascinating about her story, what your takeaways were, what you learned, and thank her for coming on the show. All right, as I'm recording this outro, it's the middle of the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. We're stuck in quarantine. And so here's the difference between high performers during quarantine and the masses. The masses are fighting over toilet paper. They're binging on Netflix. They're cooped up, getting stir crazy at home. High performers are using this time to train themselves up on key skills so that they can get ahead when they go back to work, especially if your job has changed or if you've lost your job or something like that. High performers are positioning themselves to take advantage of this opportunity. So how can you take advantage of that? Well, I'm offering you guys, I will send you a copy of my book, Superconductors. I'll ship it to you anywhere. You just have to go on my website. There's a link. You can click on the cover of the book. You just pay for shipping. I bought the books for you. I've got a bunch of books. I'll send them out. I'll send you a copy of the book. So all you got to do is go to my website. If you click on the Superconductors, you can get your free copy, which is all the skills you need to succeed in the job market of the future. Let's call it the human-specific skills you're going to need with all this automation and robots and AI and all of these things. So I want to offer that to you guys. Yeah, just go to derekloudermug.com and I'll send you a copy. All right. Thanks so much for listening. If you find this show helpful or interesting or amusing in any way, would love for you to share it with your friends. If you found it useful, then they probably will too. And would love for you to leave a review. That's one of the best ways you can help the show grow and help new people find out about this content. So if you haven't done that already, please do that. We will love you forever. All right. Thanks so much for listening. Now it's your turn to go out there and be adventurous.